Hey, so one more little thing we've got to do before we get to a position where we can start shaping this neck is to put the side dots in the side of the fretboard there for the reference point for the 3, 5, 7, 9, 12 frets, etc. Phil's elected not to have any dot markers on the actual fretboard itself, which I concur is a really elegant look. I tend to do it on most of my guitars. At the end of the day, if you're a guitar player and you've been playing for a little while, the chances of you hunching over the guitar and looking at the fretboard are pretty slim. Most guitarists take the reference from the side of the guitar. So we're going to inlay some dots in the side of the guitar, and I'll show you how to mark out and stick them in. As with all things high end, we're not using mother of toilet seat or plastic. We're using actual authentic pearl shell, abalone shell actually, to create the dot markers. So let's have a little look how we mark that up and pop those in, and then we can crack on and do some more work on the rest of the neck and the body. So here's the actual pearl shell pieces themselves. They are 3 millimeters in diameter, and obviously we've selected a 3 millimeter drill bit to drill the holes. So we need to mark them out, and then we need to drill. One of the things we are going to do is we're just going to take a quick measurement of the take a quick measurement of the depth of the marker, which is 1.12 millimeters, next to nothing. So what we're going to do then is we'll set our calipers to 1 and not very much more of a millimeter. We'll grab a little bit of masking tape and we'll just mark the depth of the drill bit so that we are happy that we're not going to go any deeper than we need. Lovely. So that is literally that's literally next to nothing depth wise. Obviously there's a little bit of a pointy end on the drill, so I've taken the measurement from where the pointy end stops and the actual width of the drill bit starts to form. At the end of the day, if there's a tiny little V in the bottom of the hole, then that's not going to fall into it. So the important thing is to make sure that we've got just enough depth. We don't want it too shallow because obviously it'll fall out, and we don't want it too deep, otherwise it'll disappear into the hole and you'll never see it again. So that's our drill prepped up. Now let's have a little look at marking up. Alright then, so there's the side of our neck. Now this might sound very, very obvious to you, but please do take a heed to this, because this is serious business. Mark the points where the dots are going to go, including the 12th. I've denoted that with 2 little arrows to show me which fret the 12th is. Check it again, and check it a 3rd time. If you get this wrong, then there's no going back. You end up with holes in the wrong places, and that's just not on. It has been done. I have done it. Every guitar maker has done it, I'm sure. Don't let it happen to you. Please, please, please. Check before you before you make your marks and make your holes. So the next thing we've got to do then, I've popped a center line, and when I say a center line, I mean the middle of the fretboard wood. So I've marked the line in there, which is going to give me the line in which the dots are going to happen. And then quite simply, we're going to have to find halfway point between each one of the designated frets, the 3, the 5, the 7, the 9, the 12, etc. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. One way is quite obvious, to take the tangs of the frets, measure the space between, and half the number, and Robert's your father's brother. Everybody's happy. I'm going to show you a little technique that my dear old granddad taught me for finding the center of something. And again, if you can avoid having to measure and do things using calculation of eye, then all the better. It takes the maths out of it. I've never been particularly good at maths. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roughly eyeball where I think the centre is. And I'm going to set my calipers, I hope you can see this, again from the centre of the fret tang, and I'm going to set it slightly longer than where I imagine the midline to be. And I'm going to mark, just rub off the mark that I made initially, so I don't get confused. I'm going to mark a line from one side, and I'm going to go to the other fret tang, and I'm going to mark a line from the other side. And because we slightly overestimated the 2 points, we now have 2 lines, and the centre is slap bang in the middle of the 2. So thank you, Grandad. Use that many, many times. So again, just to recap, find what you consider to be slightly wider than the centre and mark from one end and then from the other end, and you'll end up with 2 points. Your centre point is slap bang in the middle of the 2 of those. So I'm happy I've got that. I've got my centre line drawn through the fretboard. I've got my centre line for the between the 2 frets. I'm going to pop my bradawl into the point that I've made, bring it up right so it's at 90 degrees, and just make a reference point, just a dot. So that's all groovy. I won't show you obviously every one of those because it's obvious. The only other thing we've got to take into consideration is that on the 12th fret there's obviously going to be 2 dots. So what I tend to do is the same trick, find a point halfway between the 2 or more. That's a little bit too much more. Find the centre point, which is going to be bang on between the 2 marks I've just made, so that's there. And then I do the same thing again. I measure halfway between the points I've just made, which is there, and do the same the other side, there and there, which is there. So I've halved, in simple terms, I've halved the fret and then gone equidistant between the 2 newly formed centre lines, and then again offer my bradawl in 90 degrees and make a good clunk. Alright, so that's the marking out of the 12th fret. I didn't need to do any calculations. Bang, done. So I'm going to mark out these now, and then we'll drill them. Okay, so again I'm going to use the hand drill for this. Much more control. So find my point and drill. 90 degrees. Ten in total. So only one thing remains, and that's to pop the actual shells in. I've hand selected each one of these for the prettiest ones, for it is a deserved cause. A little dollop of super glue. You will be surprised how often, if you start making guitars, you will end up using super glue. It is wonderful stuff. Steady hand. Pop a little sucker in. A little bit of accelerator. It is wonderful stuff. Very nasty, don't breathe it in. Set super glue rock hard within seconds. Again, little dollop of super glue, which is the modern guitar maker's friend. And then again, we're going to choose a pretty pearl shell. Oh, that one's pretty. It's got a bit of greeny nonsense going on. Pop a little sucker in the hole. push it in. Sometimes easier said than done. Maybe give that a little tap. Perfect. If I'm tapping these in, incidentally, I don't know if you noticed then, I tend to kind of tap it and drag the hammer as I do so. That way it kind of falls away without sticking, there's super glue sticking to the bottom of the hammer, which obviously is a bad idea because it just pulls the inlay back out again. A little bit of squirty nonsense, and we're in business. So we'll crack on, put the rest of those in, and I'll let you have a look. Okay, so that's all the shells put in. This is I quite enjoy this bit because what we get to do now is to just grind them flat, and you start to see the beauty of them then. And it's very much like when we were leveling the side of the fretboard, the frets. You basically just keep rubbing it with sandpaper until the noise of grinding pearl shell disappears and they're nice and flush.